Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to Hustle Footy. It's your boy Ray, and tonight I've got Mac with me. Welcome, Mac.
Good evening.
Tonight we're going to be going over the action from this weekend's Premier League games. Before we get into it, though, don't forget to follow us on our social media, both on X and Instagram. Our handle is at @houseof_footy. Also, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to us. We are on both Spotify and YouTube. And lastly, feel free to get in touch with us via email. We love hearing from you guys, and we want you guys getting involved. Our email is houseoffooty@hotmail.com. Let's get straight into it, Mac. The match of the weekend that we all had eyes on, the last North London derby of the season. Spurs 2, Arsenal 3. A game, I think, of both halves. I'm going to be honest, I stopped kind of watching after the first half. Just kept it on to see if while I did stuff in the background to see if there's going to be any changes. Spurs did make a little bit of push, but of course, Arsenal come through winners here and deservedly so. What were your overall takes, though, Mac, on this result?
To start off, you can see the separation from this year's Arsenal teams to last year's Arsenal team, where very much last year's Arsenal team would have tied or, if not, lost this game. They had come out, I would argue, probably very fortunate to have a 3-0 lead, where they created 4 opportunities, scored 3 of them, so exceptionally clinical in scoring their chances. Tottenham don't really score theirs going into halftime, and you may have saw Arsenal either capitulate, collapse, or a mistake would kind of drag them all the way down to drop points potentially. Of course, they almost went there off of the backs of David Raya and Declan Rice, both making uncharacteristic mistakes thus far this season for them respectively. But Arsenal still been able to hang on and survive and outlast the kind of Tottenham attack towards the end of the game. So I think that is the first takeaway. You can see the growth, the improvement from last year towards this year. As well as you can probably see, even though there's been a lot of questions in regards individually to what individual performers are going to stand out, who has to have big games under certain situations. Even though I would argue it wasn't his best game, and nowhere near by far, I thought the best player on the pitch by far was Bukayo Saka for Arsenal. He had the most touches, most duels won, tied for most tackles, most fouls, most shots, and most shots on target. So he was really, in terms of what Arsenal was creating in the final third, the major outlet of, okay, if we're going to be able to get something out this game, it's going to come from him. Kai Havertz did a great job as well, but I would argue the standout goal, the standout moment really was Saka's goal on Davies, where he was able to cut inside. Davies should have done better. Bukayo should have known exactly where he's going. It was kind of similar to people would joke about with Arjen Robben. You know what's happening, but you just can't stop it. And it felt like that at that moment for Saka. So great credit to him. Great credit to Arsenal for their evolution as individuals and as a team. But again, like I said, they almost let it slip. What about you? What was your, I guess, looking back as the game as a whole, what were your initial takeaways?
Yeah, honestly, what you talked about for Arsenal, in terms of the difference between last year and this year, there is a big maturity step forward in terms of maturity. Arsenal, and we kind of talked about it, Arsenal were there to play the game, and the Spurs were really looking, I think, to play the occasion and the fact that, they're at home. They could be, quote unquote, the team that spoils the title chances for Arsenal. So they were always trying to, they did come out strong in the start, and they were trying to sort of get calls here and there, sort of get stuck in with fouls as well. Whereas Arsenal kept it very professional, and we saw it from there. The chances that they had, they were able to take and put away. You could argue, of course, against the run of play at some instances, but that shows you the maturity that they possess this season as well into the second half. 3-0, you can definitely come out into the second half thinking, okay, we've pretty much got it in the bag, but you do still have to play out the remaining 45 minutes. And Arsenal did that in a very professional manner. They knew when to take the fouls, when to slow the game down, when to speed the game up. Of course, there were some goals that they conceded through, of course, mistake from Raya at first, and then the penalty conceded by Rice. Apart from that, though, even though Spurs had a lot of the ball, they really didn't create enough to get themselves level. And I think even though they had a lot of the ball, more shots overall, Arsenal definitely looked like the team more in control, and that really shows how far they've come to I mean, again, get the win at their biggest rivals in the Premier League, and then again keep that different distance between themselves and Man City at the top of the table, which we'll talk about a little bit about afterwards. But of course, I want to bring up a man by the name of Nicholas Jover, the Arsenal set piece coach at Mac. 2 goals from corners from Arsenal, and I think we kind of should be shouting him out more because of how impactful he's been and how good Arsenal have been on set pieces, both attacking and defending. Definitely has had a effect on some of their goals this season, and it showed in this occasion for sure. Whereas both teams, you could say, had similar chances. Arsenal make the most out of their chances because they know these are the chances that we'll get in the derby. We have to make sure we put them away. And a team like Spurs, who might be still some questions defensively, they made them pay and ultimately came through. And is there any thoughts about the set pieces and how proficient Arsenal have been in terms of set pieces, Mac?
It's definitely been, I think we highlighted it even coming in from the new year, where you saw the switch of Declan Rice start to take more set pieces for Arsenal. Thinking that, he's, over 6 feet tall. He could probably be another lad in the box, but that's not really his forte. Even at West Ham, he took a lot of set pieces. So seeing them transition back over to that made a lot of sense. And they should be good at it. You just got to look at them, where you have 4 center halves all in the box, Kai Havertz in there as well. So you're having 5-6 guys at the very least over 6'1", 6'2", being a competitive headers, as well as I know I come from maybe more of an Arsenal fan's perspective, where I enjoy the shithousery that this player provides, but what Ben White does to an opposing keeper is probably one of the most infuriating things possible. The clip going around right now, and he seems to always get most of the attention for it, is where him flicking the wristband or the Velcro band for Vicario's gloves, just jokingly trying to be able to take it off, which again, I've never seen before. Love to see it. That is pure class shithousery. Willing to take it all the time. And his ability of I'm just going to stand right here and get in your way. And as soon as the corner's hit, I'm going to jump out of the way. So I'm not here. You can't really say I did anything. And again, it's perfectly legal. And it seems how keepers, which I do think it's more of a fault, I guess, of coaching staff, preparation for keepers and training them. They should know that something like that's coming, right? And they should now be expected that this is the type of set piece Arsenal is going to do. Here are different game tactics, or here are different things that we want to try to do to be able to stop it. At least try something different. Where it seems like a lot of these teams, and especially Tottenham today, they just kind of allowed it to happen, right? So credit to Arsenal, credit to their players, credit to Yover, as you talked about. But I do think, though, it's a little bit of a shame for a lot of these teams to kind of fall into the same spell. I understand as you can't literally physically move Ben White out of the way, but maybe adjust your keeper starting position. Maybe instead of zonal marking, we go back to more man-to-man and just be able to deny them to be able to get across, right? Something like that. Something different, where at least you're going to have some kind of a barrier, where it seems like now Arsenal, as long as they have a decent delivery, they're going to create a good opportunity. It seems like that's the only separation of what's not good and what is good, right?
I think as well, Vicario, I pointed out earlier, I'm not this season, and I'm not sure if something that other people have caught on, maybe the Arsenal set piece coach caught on, that I feel like he's a little bit weak in terms of coming out and catching and commanding his box. So that's definitely, I think, something that Arsenal were maybe targeting. But on the flip side, David Raya makes the mistake for his goal, but in the late parts of the second half, it's like he has glue on his gloves, because those balls are sticking to his hands. And that's what you need from a keeper, even though he's not the tallest, the biggest goalkeeper in the Premier League. Very commanding, very safe pair of hands there. And I'm sure Saliba and Gabriel were very, very happy to have that behind them in this game. But what does this mean for both teams, Mac? Of course, we know Arsenal did get the win. I guess we can kind of move on to City, and then we can kind of talk about both teams together if you want. Of course, City did win against Nottingham Forest away. A couple changes for sure in terms of their lineups. No Foden in this game. Oliver started ahead of Holland, but of course, Holland came on to score the second goal and seal the win for Man City, and Vardiol as well himself getting on the score sheet. So I feel like it's, even though it looks like in terms of the stats, a lot closer in terms of chances. City done what they needed to do to get the win, and of course a point behind Arsenal. So anything new from sort of the title race regarding these two teams, Mac?
I think this was, I would argue, Arsenal's most difficult game for the rest of the season. They still have to go away play at United, but you feel confident if they're able to go away and play at a hostile environment in Spurs and come out with the performance like they've done. They should feel confident to win out the rest of the games. Yes, the United away fixture is going to be tricky. Going to Old Trafford has been difficult for a lot of other title challenging teams, even Liverpool more recently, where you expect them to roll over United, but for some reason, whatever, Old Trafford does it in for you, right? So they should still feel confident, but I think this is a reassurance where there is a possibility where Arsenal could win out. The only difference would be is, are City going to win out as well? Because a performance like today shows that they don't have to play at their best. They don't have to be firing at all cylinders. In fact, I would argue Nottingham Forest created higher quality chances, but City did just enough, right? In those key moments, they had those key players to, you know what, we're going to be able to get us across the finish line, Guardiola, and then even Haaland to be able to secure it, where as soon as you saw him come onto the pitch, you notice a different Kevin De Bruyne running around, where like, oh, my boy's here, I got him, I know the run he wants to make, my life is easier. It kind of gives him a little bit more life himself.
Right.
I think now they've assisted Kevin De Bruyne since the beginning of last year has assisted like 13 of Haaland's goals, which is the most in that time period since the beginning of last year. It feels almost like I was asking you, I think you couldn't hear me earlier when we were getting ready for the podcast, is where it's now the Kane to Son connection,
right,
but just juiced up with a lot more like HGH. There is some illegal drugs that was going on in terms of that combination there, because it's just the different levels here, and it's great. It's great to see their chemistry, their built-in cohesiveness. But I guess I said from an Arsenal fan perspective, it's infuriating. It's like the most. It's like you're the second best, and you can definitely feel it this way. Is where, you know what, you're just born in the wrong generation at some point. So I was listening to some people talking about it, and then the greatest comparison is you're born in the same generation as a boxer, as Mike Tyson. You're the second greatest, but no one will remember. I don't know who the second greatest boxer during that time period was, but Mike Tyson was there, and he was fucking up everybody. And it just seems that's what City's doing to a lot of Premier League teams, right? But great quality to them, that they're able to keep this up and keep their consistency, not just in game in, game out, week in, week out, but season over season, where they're not the best, but they still win. But you know, when it gets to business at the end of the season, they're still going to pull out and get all 3 points consistently. But they still have tough games. They still, in fact, also have to play Spurs, who they themselves, I know you asked earlier in terms of what it means for them. Their destiny is no longer in their own hands. We know, it seems like as a certainty right now, only top 4 is going to make Champions League, and Spurs want to make it. And right now, they're 7 points out, 2 games in hand on Aston Villa. So they need to win out and get help. So they are going to be in a position where they're playing for every last point available, just in case if Villa do slip up even a little bit. And it may go to the end of the season when they actually do the second last game for them is against Man City. So that may be the decider in both ways. Is our Spurs by that point out of a Champions League race, and our City, is that game going to be the one that they slip up? So very interesting to see how both these teams had one out of positive for City, negative for Spurs, but their eventual kind of run-in may decide both of these races. What about you? What are your other thoughts on any other thoughts on City in the Nottingham Forest game?
City Forest, it was one of those games I was watching back the highlights, and Chris Wood, man, as an Arsenal fan, I'm sure a lot of Arsenal fans can relate. It's like the tap-in chances that he misses, and of course City not firing on their usual accurate selves, machine-like. You're thinking there's a chance here. Maybe they even drop a point. Maybe they don't necessarily lose. They just drop a point here. But of course, you get Vardiol, who has been stepping up this season. Not sure we want to have a conversation of how good he's been for City this season so far. I think he's definitely been a great addition. I mean, they definitely needed the depth, and so it kind of worked out for him and for City that he's stepped up. Definitely looks like now definitely a contender for starting 11, if not one of those regulars moving forward to next season. But as well, no Foden, Alvarez from the start ahead of Haaland. You're thinking, maybe City kind of falter here. Haaland comes on, and in a game where, in a run where he hasn't scored as much recently, he sorts his feet out, drops the defender, the Nottingham Forest defender, and puts it far post with his right foot. And you're thinking, what else can we do really, or what else can we hope for Man City? And there's just a machine, like I said, continuing to rotate their squad without other sort of competitions now. Again, more in terms of favor for them and how they see the rest of the season. But again, a lot could happen still in Man City's hands, because of course, if they do win their game in hand, they do go top of the table and eventually could become champions. And the thing is, it's not a position that they're unfamiliar with, and that's going to be something that Pep is going to be drilling down upon his players, and you're just going to have to see if there's anything that can happen and go Arsenal's way in the run. And so definitely keep an eye out on that. In terms of for Spurs, though, I'm sure we'll probably preview it a little bit later. Their match coming this week. I think Christian Romero, man, he was essentially playing as a second striker in much of that second half, and I'm thinking, okay, well, if you have that, you have your center back joining up in the attack for most of the second half, and Richarlison, I mean, he came on, so I guess to be given the benefit of the doubt, maybe he wasn't fully ready to start. Still doesn't look good, and maybe that striker position could be a concern for Spurs in not just moving forward, but just in their games remaining. Where will they get goals from? Because the goals that they got, giveaway from Raya, a penalty kick. Previous game, they didn't score against Newcastle, and again, they do have a lot of the ball and can shift teams around, but it doesn't look as free flowing as the start of the season. I think we've also seen on social media that James Maddison, his involvement has kind of dried up. Kulusevski, him as well. Brennan Johnson has kind of stepped up, but not to the extent that sort of you expect from him. And it's kind of unfair to expect him to really come in first season and drag the team up with him. So interested to see what will happen there with Spurs. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have for City and Arsenal. I guess at this point we can take a quick break here, Mac, and then we'll be back covering some more Premier League games, and we'll also preview next week's midweek game. So stay with us, guys. Welcome back to House of Footy, guys. We are going to continue now discussing some more Premier League games that took place this weekend. We're going to go straight to West Ham 2, Liverpool 2. Mac, this was the final chance for Liverpool to really keep pace with Arsenal and City at the top of the table, but unable to get the win at West Ham, which was a concern of ours in our preview last week. Liverpool, again, having to come from behind from conceding a goal through, again, sort of falling asleep in defense, the short corner taken, and then, of course, could just find Bowen inside a crowded box. And Liverpool, you just can't have that if you're chasing a title. So, of course, Liverpool were able to come back and score a couple goals themselves, but ultimately, Antonio gets in behind the defenders as well, and then it's found by, I think, Shufal, the player playing him through, if I'm not mistaken. Great ball, great run by him, and ultimately that kind of did it for West Ham. I mean, it looks like it's done for Liverpool. There's further points that we can talk about afterwards as well in terms of some internal conflict happening. But what were your overall takes from this result, Mac?
Much of the same for Liverpool. It's been what they have been quite recently, right? Where they concede first, and they kind of give themselves in the hole, they dig themselves out, but the same way their consistent failures defensively come back to bite them in the ass, where in defensive set pieces, the disorganization, it always comes back to haunt them, where they're not solid enough on that end, as well as offensively, they're not clinical enough on the other. So it's half a dozen one and nothing of the other. You know what I mean? It's not good enough on either way, where if you were solid enough defensively, okay, you're all comfortable missing some of those chances because you're able to keep a clean sheet or only kind of win games 2-1. Or are you going to score 4 or 5 goals where you can be this kind of chaotic defensively, where you can sustain those heavier losses? But it's not good enough either way for Liverpool, and it's been the trend recently of why now, I think this, as you put it, the final nail in their coffin for their title race. It is done there, and the way that it's ended has not been pretty, because these were situations where I would argue where when the younger players were coming in, a lot of injuries, you can use that as a platform. You're able to still win games, but it's the younger players doing this. It's not really kind of on the seasoned professionals, the veterans that have been there. They have done it before. But now for them to come back in and really be the same, if not worse, because now you're still losing the game. Now you're losing the games. That's not a comfortable way to have Jurgen Klopp's swan song there. So it's a little bit unfortunate on that end. Individually, on the West Ham side, this is what they do, right? In terms of expected goals, it was 0.7 versus 1.7 for Liverpool. So all they want to do is create one or two really good opportunities, take those, and if their defensive is sound enough, that should get them over the line in these games. And that's what it did for them, to be able to at least come out with a point. It's unfortunate on there, and I would argue for the first goal against, that was an own goal off Areola, because it literally went off 3 players before it went off Areola. That's just unfortunate for them. So you may even argue from their perspective, they should have won this game 2-1 if luck just wasn't completely against them. And I think that's a fair way to look at it from their perspective. So again, this is what they do, feel very comfortable in this. Again, I think, though, for them as a club, if they want to reach that next step, there has to be some sort of change up just to evolve, where maybe do they go on to kind of that Newcastle rate around that to be able to chase down potentially a top 4 spot and be more so in those conversations versus a flip of the coin and kind of praying for the best against these bigger teams? We'll wait and see. But at least what we know as of right now is they have the quality players up front to be able to create opportunities, to score key goals, as well as defensively they are sound enough to, on their day, do a good job. And they, like I said, they did just enough to be able to kind of hold on to Liverpool and keep them back a little bit. What about you? Any other major takeaways from this game?
Yeah, I mean, Liverpool, like I said, even though Liverpool came from behind, went on to take the lead, but weren't able to hang on to that lead. And so that in itself is a wider problem as well that we can touch on, because I want to come back to Liverpool. But West Ham, I got to shout out big boy Jared Bowen, 20 goals this season, and actually the player that assisted the Mikel Antonio goal as well. So what a fantastic season he's had. My concern for West Ham is how they're going to finish the season, because yes, they are still, I believe, 9th in the Premier League, and Chelsea are right behind them. And even though West Ham have had an up and down season, you can say the fact that Chelsea are right behind them, a point behind them actually, and 2 games in hand. It's like that's kind of the barometer on how well your season's gone. Are Chelsea right behind you? Are Chelsea doing anywhere near as good as you? You could argue that they kind of underperform based on the players that they have. But again, going into the next season, will they have Paquetá? Will they have Bowen and or Kudus? So, and what will that striker position look like? So it's going to be an interesting offseason for West Ham. Hopefully they can finish as high as possible for the remainder of the season. But for Liverpool, again, we can kind of touch on the issues that they're having in terms of internal conflict. But I really have to shout out the players coming through in Harvey Elliott. I know Curtis Jones didn't play in this game, but he's been definitely a bright spot for Liverpool whenever he's featured. Gavin Birch, McAllister, definitely for the future. And kind of looking towards now, Liverpool have nothing really else to play for the rest of the season. So I'm kind of looking to see who's going to be playing for Liverpool in the last games, because Salah, Nunez not performing well and even having a little bit of a disagreement with Klopp. Could that be a wider thing? Could this be, I mean, now that we know Klopp is leaving, Salah won't really have a problem moving forward. But what is your take there, Mac? What do you expect to really happen for Liverpool there?
For Liverpool, a couple of things that I'm taking a look at. One, the midfield, kind of which I was a little bit more harsh on in the previous matchup, I thought was better. Endo coming in to play as defensive midfielder, as that anchor, seems to solve a lot of their initial problems, where McAllister has a little bit more free roam. Gravenberch provides the athleticism. He was able to get into the box to be able to create certain opportunities. He wasn't able to finish, but I think on a different day he maybe scores one of those goals, but that's not really his job. His job is to be able to kind of bridge the gap between them and the attackers, which those three up front, Diaz, Gakpo, and Elliott. Elliott was the best of the three, but still not fantastic. And that's also been an issue where I would argue, any of their rotational front six hasn't been on form the last, 4 or 5 games, where it hasn't really kind of carried them through. The last part that leaves me questions is where it's been heavy rotation, and I think will be, I guess, the next manager's problems really solve if everyone's still kind of together there on the team, is the Trent, if it's Konate, Kwanzaa, whoever's playing the right center half position, because the mishaps seem to consistently happen in that area of the pitch. Is that because Trent's now going as an invert fullback, and now there's more space in between the two of them? There's more attacking space out wide. The last goal for Antonio was put a kind of plate down in between Kwanzaa and Trent. Both of them not marking anybody. Trent, literally, the screenshot of him just standing there expecting somebody to jump up and compete for header as he watches it go in. Not a great look. I understand that's not his forte, but having to be able to figure out a way to fix that area of the pitch, I think, is going to be important. Do you switch? Van Dijk's played his entire career at left center half. Do you move him over there and bring someone else in that position? Again, it'll be an interesting evolution, and there are a lot of quality players on this team, but it's definitely not a complete team. And things have to be, either players have to come in and out, system change has to be done. And the good part is Klopp can wipe his hands clean of this, and move on, be able to kind of take care of what he does. And the new manager will be able to kind of put their imprint on the team. Arne Slot, I think that's his first name, from Feyenoord. Again, don't know much about him. We'll definitely have to learn a lot more before he starts for Liverpool. I'm sure you've maybe started to go on your little bit of a deep dive to see what has he done? Why do we want him? And how can I be happy about it? And figure out a way. But we'll get there. But there is still a lot of changes that need to happen on this team for the rest of the season, though. That I am for me, that's just natural. That's going to be happening in any transitional period when you move over one historic successful manager over to another. But the disappointing part is the Salah-Klopp relationship, right? Again, it's probably maybe a one-off. They probably done that dozens of times in training, and no one's caught it on camera. But it's unfortunate given the time that it was done, and now you can start pinpointing on other problems, right? Is it similar to, we always use the basketball comparison, at least on this podcast that we're talking about. Is it like a Draymond Green, Kevin Durant, where Draymond Green's like, "You're not going to be here next year. Why do you even care?" type of thing, And it's just. Because of the spotlight that Klopp put on it earlier, people are going to kind of immediately address it and make it bigger than it even is, and they may even feel. So I hope, obviously, there is some sort of, not let's say reconciliation. I don't need like a tweet to come out. I don't need like a video to come out on that.
An apology.
I don't need that. We don't need that. But because we know that they do have a strong bond considering how long they've been together. But it's just unfortunate that this moment happened in this situation at this time. So it's tough to see that.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'd have to say about it looks like it's going to be a confirmed appointment for Arne Slot, is he looks like he's very much interested in taking the job. And as a Liverpool fan, you really want, of course, anyone applying for a job is going to make it seem like they want the job. But it definitely seems like things advance really quickly, and he kind of forced the hand there on his current club, Feyenoord. So that's the only thing you kind of wish for, and then of course we'll see what happens in the future. So let's keep an eye on what happens between these two teams, or with these two teams for the remainder of the season. But Mac, let's move on to another kind of high-scoring match that took place this weekend: Aston Villa 2, Chelsea 2. Kind of, we had an eye on this earlier when we were watching the match together. Aston Villa go on to a 2-0 lead, but are pegged back by Chelsea, who actually could have won it late in the second half against Villa. So very much like Arsenal and Spurs, a game of two halves, you can argue, where Chelsea, even though they were down on their luck, getting slapped by 5-0 by Arsenal and then losing to Man City in the FA Cup, you could expect that, 2-0 down, they're kind of down and buried, but they were still able to come back. And so I guess your overall takes, Mac, on what we've learned from these two teams?
Again, for Aston Villa, I don't want to take too much away from their individual performance because, again, considering the result with Spurs, that is just enough for them right now. Getting a point is the separator, and they are doing enough against these bigger teams. And looking at the remaining schedule for them individually, they don't have to play too many. They have, I would argue, a much lighter schedule in comparison to Spurs. So this point here should be just enough to, we're going to feel comfortable. We're going to be able to get over the line to finish in the top four, and their destiny is in their own hands. For Chelsea, it's great to see a comeback where you do see that, we're able to get back in the game, 2 goals down at halftime, score 2 goals, get back in the game. A fantastic goal from Conor Gallagher. Madueke was causing problems the entire game. He always seemed like a threat whenever he was on the ball. So great moments there. Fantastic to see all that. it's just you don't at the same time don't want to congratulate it too much because one, why were they down to nothing in the first place, considering they were in control of a lot of the game, a lot of the possession? Because again, they had 21 shots, but only 5 were on target. They weren't clinical in their moments. They had an abundance of opportunities, but didn't do enough in the first half to make it worthwhile, or even being 2-1 down and come back to then potentially win, considering your control. So it's tough to really kind of take too much away from this Chelsea performance, other than this probably at least gives a little bit of feel-good factor, and hopefully that they get a better run-in for the rest of the season and climb up the table to at least be in a more of a respectable position in comparison to where they are now. But again, this Chelsea team, I think I would argue, well, we've only been doing podcasts for a couple of years, but we've been watching soccer for quite a long time. I think this is one of the most confusing teams I have ever seen in terms of what do we actually expect to get out of them. And again, this game was very much similar to that. It's like anything is possible with this team. So, yeah, I know it seems like I'm all over the place.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Chelsea season. So
I mean,
I don't know what to do.
If you have Nicholas Jackson missing those chances that could have tied it up actually in the first half, you kind of feel bad for Chelsea. But yeah, they were able to come back, which is kind of opens things up. So I guess to throw it a little bit more certainty into our kind of prediction for Spurs versus Chelsea. Like we just talked about, Aston Villa probably did enough with this result to get a top 4 position, assuming they win out for the rest of the games or at least get positive results. Because Spurs, you could argue this is kind of the upcoming match against Chelsea might be one of their more easy matchups for the remainder of the season. They do face West Ham. Sorry, they do face Liverpool, Burnley, and Man City as well. So it's I don't really know what to expect from Chelsea. And at the same time, we just talked about Spurs not really being able to score per se. So I guess I'll toss it to you, Mac. Chelsea at home against Spurs. We saw a crazy match where Nicholas Jackson got a hat trick in that result. Could we see another Nicholas Jackson goal or hat trick this time around? And maybe for Spurs, can we see Richarlison coming into some sort of form in this game? A lot to put on you, but what are your expectations there?
So are you basically pitching to me that we're going to have the battle of the bummy strikers? Is that what's it's called? Again, I'm going to go with, is there going to be a hat trick from either of those players? Probably not.
Probably not.
But how about this? Most definitely not. Maybe a hat trick of missed great chances between the two players. That seems more realistic to me.
Right.
Interestingly enough, I actually do favor Chelsea a little bit here. One, just from a historical sense, Spurs have struggled at Stamford Bridge historically. It's been a piss poor run for them. They don't generally win in this fixture. They are the better team, though. I think, though, that this may be, in fact, more of a barn burner. I wouldn't be surprised in terms of, let's say, most of the games in terms of expected goals, when you're looking at it, they range from 1 to 2 expected goals depending on the matchup. And that's on the higher end between two teams, right? Where each team may get that amount those opportunities. I wouldn't be surprised if we see 3 or 4 expected goals for both of these teams. That could mean we get 5 goals from both teams, but that also means because of their poor ability in the front of the net, we only get 1 goal from each team. So even though I wouldn't necessarily expect in terms of a goal fest here, I do expect a lot of opportunities, a lot of mistakes, and whoever either kind of thrives off the chaos a little bit more, or on their individual day does not fuck up as much, or more likely to be able to pull out and kind of win all 3 points, which is why, considering it's at home, considering the history of how poorly Spurs have done at Stamford Bridge, I lean Chelsea, but not by much.
Not much.
But not by much. I think what might even be most fun is that we see like a 3-3 tie, and we get not too dissimilar. It seems like a century ago, kind of a Thomas Tuchel, Antonio Conte handshake. Something like that. I wouldn't be surprised if we have that type of atmosphere, considering everything going on between both of these teams.
And Ange and Poch, those two types of managers, I can definitely see energy kind of boiling up between these two managers and sort of exploding at the end of that game. So something to definitely to keep an eye out. If there's going to be another Conor Gallagher finish like the one that he had against Aston Villa, though, I am very interested in seeing some of those goals. But I'm going to read out the remaining results from this weekend. Mac will quickly pick out something that really stood out to you. Fulham 1, Crystal Palace 1, Man U 1, Burnley 1, Newcastle 5, Sheffield 1, Wolves 2, Luton 1, Everton 1, Brentford 0, and Bournemouth 3, Brighton 0. I'll go first, though, Mac, just to give you maybe some time to think about yours. Newcastle, Sheffield for me. Sheffield needed to win against Newcastle, went in the lead actually in this game, and really had a chance to make it more before half. But again, the defending has been so poor for them. Alex Isak, just too good, and definitely one of the better strikers in this division. Just shows the quality that he has, and Sheffield in that run of in the second half where they concede 5 goals, it just puts it away from them. Kind of a bookend to their finish. You kind of expected now that you expected it going into this game that they'll be relegated, but at this point, yeah, not the result that those fans would have wanted to see. And I guess, but at the end of the season, from now to the end of the season, the fans will just look to, or the players will look to just play enough to give some fans the something to cheer about. So we'll see what happens with Sheffield in the offseason. Any other things stand out from those results, Mac, that I listed out?
I'm going to have to go on my hater mode here for 2 different teams and who played in the exact same match. It's going to be the Manchester United versus Burnley match that tied 1-1. First, to go on, I guess, slightly the more positive side, Burnley, they picked up a point playing against Manchester United. I think it was at Old Trafford as well. That's a fantastic, if you go at the beginning of the season, be like, hey, if we get that point, that's fantastic. They should have won this game by a lot, and they should have won it comfortably. And if they got all 3 points, they would be right now tied and level on points with Nottingham Forest, which then they can see, oh, there is a more clear pathway for us to be able to stay up in the Premier League. So, like, they've picked up points in 4 of the last 5 games. Everything looks positive that way. They're on an upward trajectory. Potentially, they have tough games. I still think it's going to take a Herculean effort for them to be able to stay in the Premier League. But this is a game that they should have and could have won. And I think is another performance that if they don't stay up, they're going to look back on it as like, hey, if we did pick up points here, we would have stayed up. On the other end, Manchester United, I think a couple things. One, you still saw a couple individual performances, which I really, really liked. Harry Maguire, I would argue, this season has probably been Manchester United's 3rd best player in the Premier League. If you go, let's go, Bruno Fernandes, Garnacho, Kobe Manu, sure, but he's played like half the season. Who else you got? Like
Onana probably, but
Salah,
that's about
Onana. Like Maguire is one of their best players, which is crazy to think about. Great, but it's a fantastic comeback story in some ways, where in terms of what he's been able to kind of rebuild his career. Where I would argue he's been at least the best center half this year, and I think that's without question. However, I think what Ten Hag has done is he's said things after press conference consistently, which confounds me. And I want to read you a quote. And I don't know how much of this game that you've seen, but this may be one of the most blatant lie of a quote. And again, we both joke and enjoy when Klopp says, for example, oh, the pitch was too wet or the pitch was too dry. Stuff like that's hilarious. It's funny. But this is just dumb. He says, we are one of the most dynamic and entertaining teams in the league at this moment. We are creating loads of chances by playing good football. That is a bold-faced, you're entertaining for your opposition. You're entertaining for someone that wants to hate watch you, but you're not playing good football, and you're probably driving your fans crazy. Like saying stuff like that after you tie Burnley 1-1 at home, as a Manchester United manager, I understand maybe you trying to fluff up your resume for Ineos coming in. Kudos to you. I hope they're not dumb enough to see that and be like, you know what, he's got a point there. Because if they do, then Manchester are even more trouble than we think they are. So again, pour on Burnley, should have won the game. Pour on Manchester United for their performance, and still trying to figure out a way to twist it to a positive.
Yeah, I mean, Burnley, I kind of have to fault both teams here because Burnley, you let Anthony score out of all players. Decent finish. Again, Burnley creating their own mistakes, which is something that they've been doing, and it's kind of why they're where they are currently. Not a good look for them. And then for Man U, like you said, conceding many chances against a Burnley side who haven't been great all season. But even the penalty kick that they do concede, I kind of have to go on a limb and say it's a little bit, definitely a foul, but considering the circumstances, not a good one to concede. I could see other times that other people might say it's something that shouldn't be called. I mean, it's a foul all day, I think, considering the fact that Onana doesn't get anywhere near the ball and just flat out takes out the attacker. So nothing really I can learn from this game because Man U shoot themselves in the foot again, and Burnley say the same thing, and that's exactly where both teams are, which is kind of leading us to not really learning anything from these two teams. Just wanted hopefully one team to get all 3 points, just so that we could have something more to talk about. Because now Man U kind of playing for a European spot, Burnley continuing to chase that final safety spot in the Premier League. So we'll see how that plays out. Of course, we'll have more of the relegation battle in our next podcast. And as well, we'll also preview some of the. We'll review some and preview some of the upcoming games next weekend. So we'll conclude our podcast here for today. If you guys like what you heard, if you guys like what you heard, please like and subscribe to us on our social medias. That's at @houseof_footy. If you have any comments, suggestions, or general banter, get in touch with us via email as well, hustleFooty@hotmail.com. Next time you hear from us will be Friday, when we will be reviewing the Chelsea Spurs midweek game, and we'll also preview next weekend's Premier League matches. But until then, Mac, thank you for joining us.
Peace out.
See you guys soon.